Hey everyone, I am Drea Noka. I am co-founder of the Alkalign Lifestyle Wellness Center alongside my husband and co-founder, business partner, Fidel Struligo Noka II. And today I had something specific in mind that I wanted to record for this video, and actually things kind of took a turn. And so I'm actually going to be speaking on something completely different than what I had planned. I had planned on talking about food, but I realized that the thing that I need to talk about the most is the thing that I've been running from the most. And usually when we confront the thing that we've been running from, there are so many blessings on the other side of it. So today I'm going to be talking about my mental health journey, and to give a backstory of where this kind of inspiration came from to even talk about it as I am talking about it today. I was actually, discussing my plans with the other video I had planned to do about food. And my husband's suggestion was, to talk about something else, because that's not the thing that is really pressing on my heart. And I was sitting there listening to what he was saying, and I was going within and saying to God, this isn't what I want to do. This isn't my plan. This is not the thing that this isn't my plan. So I'm like fighting with God, and I'm like, my eyes are closed and I'm like fighting energetically and in my head. And the peaceful answer that washes over me is, this is your work. And it doesn't matter what you had planned, because my plans supersede yours. And I just started crying. And my husband was so confused, like, why are you crying? Because he's on the outside, he's not in here having this energetic conversation. And I remembered, as I was explaining to him, why I was emotional about it, I remembered that I had made a covenant with God years ago, about 10 years ago, that I did not hold up my end of the bargain. And it led me down a path based off of patterns, which we're going to talk about. And ultimately, it gave me the biggest consequence that I never saw coming. And so 10 years ago, I attempted suicide. It was my first legitimate suicide attempt. I've done other self-harm things in the past, starting in about 7th grade or going into 7th grade. I remember carving into my skin, and I remember snapping rubber bands on my wrist. And then I remember eventually, after what I condoned as approval for this type of behavior, watching somebody very, very close to me cut on his arms. This was a romantic relationship, my first romantic relationship, close one. I started to engage in cutting my own wrists, and this led me down a very, very dark path. And when I struggled with my mental health for a long time, and I had gotten to the point in my 20s, I was 22, going on 23, or maybe no, I was 23 actually. So this was because this was 10 years ago. I was 23, and my husband and I had only been dating for about 9 months. So we met in January, and this attempt happened in September of that same year. I remember going out with some friends to the bars. There was a UFC fight. My husband was actually out with his own friends in a different part or a different city of the Phoenix metro area. I just gotten off of work in Scottsdale, Arizona, and I went out with some friends to watch the fight, which I had no interest in, but it was a popular thing going on that night, and I didn't want to go home, and I wanted to be social, and I knew that the person that I wanted to go home to was unavailable, and I was not invited to go to where he was, and he, I'm sure, wasn't thinking that to invite me, that I would be interested, or that I'd be getting off late from work, but he had every plan and every intention of meeting up with me afterwards. I went out with some friends. I had been drinking, and I ended up meeting up with an old flame of mine. And the temptation to smoke marijuana, which was like a regular thing that I did with this person, came up, and I was tempted to do it. I was feeling very destructive, and I didn't do it. I ended up just going home, but I felt this sense of guilt wash over me, and I felt like I was cheating, and I felt like I was not getting attention from the person that I wanted the attention from. So I remember, because I was calling up his phone, I was texting, and he was unresponsive, and I was just angry. I ended up just going to sleep. He came over to my house, I think at like 2 a.m. He came over to my house, and I just started fighting with him. He woke me up, and I just started fighting with him, and I was angry. And to cut to the chase, out of internal pain, not wanting to talk about what I had done earlier that night, and really just wanting attention from somebody, because I had been hurting for a very long time, very deeply, I went into my cabinet in my kitchen, and I popped an entire bottle, over half of a bottle. What I had already dipped into some of it a little bit a few other times, but not in this fashion. A bottle of Excedrin migraine medication. And the intent was to just escape. And so I took the whole bottle of pills, and I went back to my bed, and my partner was like, okay, I'm gonna leave. He didn't actually know what was going on. He was in my room. I had left my room. I think he was packing up his things, and I ended up going into the kitchen and taking the bottle of pills. And I went back into the bedroom. He was packing up his stuff, and he walked out. And that was, I realized, a really big trigger for me was the leaving, because the prior relationship that I talked about, where I learned about cutting, that relationship was very, very emotionally abusive. It was very toxic, and there was a lot of threat to leave and to harm himself. And so the dynamic of that relationship was who could hurt one another the most, and that's what I learned. So in this relationship, when something got very, very scary and I felt threatened, I retaliated. And I didn't want to feel the pain of being abandoned, and I felt like I was being abandoned. And from my childhood, I was emotionally neglected by my parents. They just weren't there, and so that was a huge trigger for me. And when I went to lay back in bed, I realized what I had just done, and I was like, I don't know if that's a decision that I really want to fully allow it to unfold. I think I made a mistake. I walk out of my bedroom, I go into the kitchen. I realize that the light is on. I can see down the hallway, I see that the light is still on. And I walk into the kitchen, and my husband, who was my boyfriend at the time, was sitting on the countertop, and he was on his phone. And I told him what happened. And he was very calm. I'm sure he was panicked on the inside, but he was very calm. And he ended up rushing me to the hospital, where they pumped my stomach. They gave me charcoal, And I was in the hospital for about 2 days, recovering from that physically. And my husband was by my side as often as he possibly could. And when he wasn't, he was home with my dog taking care of her. From there, I was transported to a behavioral health facility. I was told that I had the option to go. And this was almost like, an opening for me to start the work that I needed to do. But I didn't know exactly what I was getting into. When I was 17, I was diagnosed with an eating disorder, and I chose outpatient care. So when this opportunity, call it an opportunity, came up, I chose to go inpatient because I felt like I was not getting to the root of why I was so unhappy. And so I was transported by ambulance to the behavioral health facility, and I was there for 5 days. And for 5 days, for 3 of those 5 days, maybe 2.5, maybe half that time, I don't really recall, I slept a lot. I cried a lot. I journaled, and I took advantage of every opportunity to see my visitors, which was consistently my significant other and one or both or 2 of my family members. My mom was out of town at the time taking care of my grandmother, who was dying. So I was put on medication. I was put on sleep aids. I was put on bipolar medication. I was put on sleep aids. I remember being in the hospital, or in that place, and seeing so many other people who were there for much longer than the time that they were told that they were going to be there for. And I just remember seeing people really pissed off, and it set them back a lot. So my idea was to play the game. And to play the game was to imagine myself leaving and being, basically discharged, and going home to my dog and going home to my family, and, living as though this never happened. And I went to every meeting. I went to every group activity. I participated. I showed up. I did not sleep through anything. I slept when I was supposed to sleep. I do remember one time, and it was probably one of the first nights, where I wanted to throw up, and I was, I don't remember if I actually did throw up, but nonetheless, after 5 days, I was discharged. And I remember being so happy. My spouse picked me up, or my significant other, we'll call him significant other or boyfriend in this scenario, but he picked me up and he took me home. I remember feeling a flood of anxiety wash over me, like serious panic. I remember we went back to my home. I saw my dog, and I was living with one of my brothers at the time, and then another roommate, I think, maybe 2 roommates or 1 roommate. But I remember being at home, and my partner and I had decided we were going to take a nap, lie down and take a nap. I couldn't sleep. I felt like I was itching and crawling inside my whole body. I couldn't sleep. I wanted to. I was just like, I felt like I was having a panic attack. I remember one of the things the activities that I felt at ease with when I was in the hospital was coloring in a coloring book. So I left while my partner was laying down for a nap. I left to go to the Walgreens or CVS, one of the 2, to pick up a coloring book and some coloring pencils. And I came back and I just colored. And from then on, I was in a very, very deep state of depression. I was very heavily medicated. And I remember my significant other had gotten an opportunity to coach basketball up north in Wisconsin for a men's college basketball team. And he decided to go. And I felt like I was being abandoned again. I couldn't bear the fact of him leaving and watching him leave me, so I decided to pack up my things and I'm gonna go stay with my family because I did not feel safe. I stayed with my parents in their home. I brought my dog with me and I was there for probably 3 weeks straight. And I remember being bedridden because I was so energetically drained, I was so depressed, and I was so medicated. I remember my partner, when he was up north, how distant he was, and for good reason. He had to protect his own energy. I remember feeling like I was being abandoned another time. While I was in the hospital, or while I was in the behavioral health facility, my dad had a conversation with the school. I was going to ASU at the time, Arizona State University, and this was supposed to be my last semester of school, or my last year of school. And this was actually my last semester of school. And I only had a couple classes left. I think I had 2 classes remaining. And my dad had me withdrawn from my classes. And then he had a conversation with my employer at the time. I was working in a restaurant, and he had let them know until I'm, I'm finally able to take on work, I would not be working. So I was like a leave of absence. For 3 to 4 weeks, like I said, I was bedridden. I had no energy. I could barely feed myself. I could barely take care of my dog. I remember my parents would feed my dog for me, and they would make sure that she got played with and she was taken care of. But I slept the majority of the night and the day. I was awake for only maybe 6 hours at a time. I was up, just to talk with my partner, who was very disinterested in engaging in conversation with me, although I know he really cared deeply about me. But I know for him it was very hurtful and painful what was going on. And I remember thinking about suicide. I remember imagining if I wasn't there, and I could feel how other people would respond and how things might play out. But I remembered my dog, who I made a covenant for. I made a covenant to her and with God simultaneously that when I brought her home, when I rescued her from the shelter, that I was never going to abandon her. No matter what. And I was going to give her the best life that I could possibly give her, to the best of my ability. I made sure she had the best food that I knew of at the time. I made sure that she went to the dog park regularly. I made sure she had clean water, the cleanest water I knew about at the time. I made sure that she had all the toys that she could ever want, and she got all of the love and affection, and she was like, my heart and soul was poured into this dog. And I made the vow that I would not abandon her. And so in these dark hours of imagining and really contemplating whether I should go through with this absence from life, what would happen to Jade? And I just imagined myself as her, feeling this grief, this feeling of abandonment. And I used to be very active in animal welfare, so I would imagine, I would see so many animals, and I even saw this with my roommate's pets, of these animals being abandoned and being like confused and lost and scared. And so I just, what was shown to me is the same would happen with her, and I was afraid that she wasn't going to be taken care of in the same way that I would have taken care of her. And I know that's a very controlling thing, but I just I wanted the best for her. She just gave me so much joy. She literally has a symmetrical heart-shaped pattern in her fur. It's like the way that the fur, almost like, you know, like if it's like a colic, it's like a heart-shaped colic in the center of her chest. And this dog just exudes love, unconditional love. And I felt it was my duty and my responsibility to honor that and to let as many people experience that as possible. Because that was such a gift that she gave me. And so this was like the thing that stopped me from going forward with fully escaping from life, from really like just transitioning and going through with a full suicide attempt. I remember one night that night, I think I thought about this several times, but one night finally I got down on my knees, and I had not prayed in years. I had sworn off God when I was 18. I remember being so angry at God for the things that happened in my life. I'd sworn God off. But this particular night, I was hopeless. I didn't know what to do. I was scared of my own mind. And I got down on my knees and I prayed to God with intention. If you save me from this, I will do whatever you ask me to do. I will do whatever you need me to do. And I gave that covenant. Shortly after that, I remember the following days, I actually started to have some kind of motivation to change. And I think that following day, my dad, somewhere around that time, I remember my dad got off work early. He asked me if I wanted to go for a walk with Jade. So my dad and I took my dog for a walk. And I remember he had told me, I know things are really hard, but you have to pick yourself up. You have to start doing things that feel a little bit uncomfortable, but you got to keep going, you know. And I think he pointed out to me, you know, what would happen to Jade if I didn't. And so somewhere around after that time, I remember I started picking myself up. I started, you know, feeding myself. I started going outside. I went back to school. I only took one class. I resumed my school. And the one particular class was my internship class. It was actually like a class for you to do an internship. And the internship that I was involved with was working with youth and helping our youth in Mesa, Arizona, stay drug-free. And that gave me some sort of purpose. So I started to put the work into that. My heart always led me to do things to help others who were really suffering. And so when I got offered this internship, I was ecstatic. And then when things happened and I didn't get to do that work, I did lose a sense of purpose. When I went back, I found some sort of sense of purpose. I was still a very quiet person, a very shy person, still going through my own internal battles. Started to go back to work, and bit by bit, I started to pick myself up. I started to take better care of myself. I started working out. Anxiety hit me like a brick many times, so many times, but I remember one of the gaps that I experienced, and I hope this has changed, although I don't know that it has changed, was when I went to my psychiatrist shortly after a few weeks after my my suicide attempt and being in the hospital. You know, he had advised me. I told him what happened. My mom had gone with me to this appointment, and he was very concerned because he wasn't alerted by the facility. And I told them who my psychiatrist was. Fortunately, he got me off of the sleep aids, and got me on a different medication. And this led me down a path of realizing that I wanted to experience what it's like to be normal, whatever that means. And I wanted to understand how to be a fully functioning person without medication. And so that led me down really my life's purpose. But the thing that I realized was my patterning was running from obedience and being a disobedient person. And what that looked like for me from a young age, I remember every time that I was called to be honest, I got spanked, slapped, or punished, or all three. And for me, that told me that being honest and forthcoming meant that I would get punished in some way. So it was better to be dishonest and lie and run from the truth and run from the things that I was called to do. So it was better for me to be disobedient and less punishing than it was for me to be obedient and honest. Many, many years later, I learned that eventually your dishonesty is going to catch up with you, and your disobedience are going to catch up with you. And it's going to be the biggest punishment you've ever received. And for me, that was being homeless with my family, my spouse and our 2 dogs, and living a very, very confused life for several years. A lot of self-sabotage and a lot of really, really dark nights and days, and very, very aggressive behaviors, and just feeling this insurmountable amount of rage and anger. And so circling back to this day when I'm having this conversation with my husband about what to talk about content-wise, it brought me back full circle. And it showed me that I did not honor my covenant with God. I was being disobedient. And I did not hold my end up of the bargain. And that's what led me to where I was in my life. And understanding patterns from Greg Braden's work. And if anybody's familiar with who Greg Braden is, he's a phenomenal researcher in the space of quantum science, and he explained how patterns work. And on his website, if you go to gregbraden.com, GregBraden.com, you can actually go onto his website and find this fractal calculators where you can determine your patterns, the ages in which you've had this reoccurring pattern, and where there's a sweet spot in between the start and end of a pattern. You have that sweet spot right in the middle where you can break that pattern. But you have to become understanding of what the pattern is. And I didn't understand what my pattern was, so I was repeating it over and over and over. And this thing worked because I was able to pinpoint each time in my life where there was something catastrophic that happened, and it was the results of the pattern of being disobedient and running and lying and hiding. And in order for me to break that pattern, I had to speak my truth. I had to honor the work that I'm supposed to do. And so that's just one part of the aha moment of understanding and seeing this full spectrum. The other part is I am actually working with an associate on a retreat that I am leading in Greece next year, in Kefalonia, Greece next June. And this retreat is based off of one of my workbooks. So in another video, I'm going to be talking about the chakra healing workbook, which is part of my life's work. But this associate, she is very, very attuned to her psychic abilities, and she does tarot readings and oracle readings. And I remember asking her one night, and this was a very particular night, I had gone onto her page and I was picking out certain things, and I didn't have any particular guidance to what those things were. I was just clicking on them. Whatever I felt energetically drawn to, I was clicking on. And it answered so many questions that I had about my journey and why I was going through what I was going through and what my blockages were. And one of the things that was so important was like this message about grounding, and I needed to be more grounded. And as a Gemini, very much in my air sign, so I'm very much in my head, which makes sense when you're constantly in your head, and you're constantly in your head in a negative way. It has this turmoil. But I remember asking her, because my husband had sent me this video about the Matrix, the movie The Matrix, the series of The Matrix and the series of The Terminator, and how these two series are actually, the writer intently wrote them to be about the past and the future of, of the characters. And I was watching this on TikTok, and my associate was on TikTok as well. I saw that she was, and I was watching this video. I said, I don't know why, but I feel compelled to share this with you. And she had shared with me that this was her, these were the movies that basically set her on the path that she is. They were, the catalyst for the work that she does and the journey that she's been on. Changed her life. And I had asked her, I've been getting all of these synchronicities of all these numbers, and I know something big's about to happen, but I don't know what. And my question is, how do you understand downloads? Because remember, she'd been talking about them, and I've had moments where I've received downloads, but I didn't quite understand when, people are so attuned to the messages that they receive from their spiritual guides or God or whatever you want to, see it as. But understanding what to do, following that guidance, because for me, it was very, very unclear. And my question to her was, how do you understand that you're receiving a download? And how do you know when, to wake up at 4:36 in the morning every morning that you're being called to? I just sleep. If I'm woken up by God, I just go back to sleep, which is being disobedient. And how do you know when to follow this, and that it's not just something that's being made up in your